First of all, maybe where is the start line? In the sailing instructions document given out at the beginning of the regatta, it will say, it will define exactly what the start line is in between. So often there's like a flag on the race committee boat or a red line or something. But if it doesn't say, this start line, the race committee is supposed to, you can't count on this, but the race committee is supposed to give you the benefit of the doubt. So it's not like this, it's actually from the furthest forward point on the start pin. So that can be helpful to know. So different ways that the start line could be favored. You know, I might actually bring that current into here. But so if the wind is coming from that direction, I think it's pretty easy for us to tell. But one way to visualize this is to draw a ladder rung, draw a line perpendicular to the wind direction, and then whichever end of the line it hits first, and then if we can have another line perpendicular to the wind, whichever end the ladder rung hits first is this much upwind of that end. So boat number 2 starts that much ahead of boat number 1. You can also do proportions with this. So often you think the right-hand side of the line is favored, so I have to start at the right-hand side of the line. But, you know, if you start here, you still get, you know, most of the advantage that the yellow boat gets, but you have a lot less risk. Because everyone is thinking, I want to maximize my gains. I'm so proud that I know which end of the start line is favored. And so you get this cluster here. And sometimes even if you do everything right, maybe someone comes across on port tack and you can't, or like they got stuck in irons and you can't accelerate. So you had the right idea, but you get in trouble. So there's a lot to be said about starting 2/3 of the way. This is more like maybe 3/5 of the way down to the favored end of the line. So just being careful that sometimes it's not worth getting engaged in the battle here, although sometimes it is. Sometimes the only boats who had a chance were maybe the 1, 2, or 3 boats who were furthest on the right and were able to tack out immediately, and everyone else just ends up following them in dirty air. So you have to make that decision before the start. Is this only a 3, or I guess this is even a 2 boat length advantage, in which case I can take a 1 boat length advantage and be happy? Or is this a 2 boat length advantage plus a tactical advantage? So when you're deciding which end of the line is favored, you also need to bring tactics into account. So sometimes if you have a very professional race committee, let's, just because we have it, let's bring this this current arrow into the picture. And it is common knowledge that there is current on the right-hand side of the course and not on the left-hand side. So a situation where that could happen would be if you have tide or current flowing this way, and this side is shallow, and this side is deep. There's a venue close to home where there's just a gentle sand. The hydrography, the bottom of the water goes deeper and deeper and deeper the further away from the beach you get. So it's like twice as much current here as there, and half as much again there. So it's very tempting to start, sorry, we've got good current. So it's very tempting to start here to get into our good current. So what an experienced high-level race committee will do is they will set the start line with a purposeful skew so that if you come up to the start line, I've exaggerated it a bit. Usually they like 5 or 10 degrees of bias. So this is a lot more than that. So you say, coming down this ladder rung perpendicular to the wind hits the pin first, so the pin is favored. I'm so clever, I'm gonna start at the pin. But the reason they favored the pin is because, you know, a third of the fleet realizes that the pin is favored, and maybe the rest of the fleet knows that they want to get into the current. So now they've split the fleet up and they're more likely to get a start without a general recall. Whereas if it was favored, people would if the start line was not favored, people would point their bow into the wind, say, oh, it's a pretty fair start line. What should I be thinking about? Oh, current. And then everyone crashes this end of the line and it becomes a very dangerous place to be. And you actually do have to get in the mix here because the deeper you sail, the faster you'll go in that example. Current is an easy one to talk about, even though it's not relevant to MKS because it's just so obviously favored. But at MKS, a lot of the time you can come out early for the Wednesday night racing, sail up one side, and the wind is just stuck to the shore. And so if you don't sail towards the shore, you're in a lot of trouble. You don't really have any other options. As an example, the extra wind there in light wind could be as powerful a favor as current. Any questions about those before I go on?
Couldn't be any current here? Like this Wednesday race, just on the corner there at Alston, it felt like it was some kind of current.
Yeah.
Something under the water that
Definitely.
Definitely
can. My favorite way of measuring current, and it probably, I don't think we have anything out there that would work, but I drop something that doesn't float very well, but does float in the water next to a buoy. So I actually, in Malmö, I dropped my visor in the water, my hat in the water, and watched which way it went for 1 minute. Another thing that's more common to have is, especially at the beginning of the day, is a water bottle that's mostly full. So most of the water bottle is underwater, and then the little air pocket keeps it afloat. Juice boxes don't work. I'm sorry. Sorry to the environment. I accidentally lost a juice box. So if you have a steel water bottle, test first how much water you need to drink. But if you could, so a proper tide stick floats just visible. Often it's a piece of pipe with gravel in the bottom, and it floats just like that to catch the current. And my rule is if it's less than 1 boat length a minute, you can basically ignore it. 2 boat lengths a minute, it's a factor. 3 or more boat lengths a minute, and it's the dominant factor. Not necessarily the dominant factor. In Malmö, it was so shifty offshore that it was still the shifts that were important. So you sit here and you watch your water bottle or your hat floating along, and then you pick it up after a minute, and you try to guess what direction it went relative to the buoy and how far about it went in that time. So my long-winded answer to Anne is that I bet if you toss something in the water next to our buoy, it would only have gone a half a boat length. And so it's not, don't get stressed about it. Because current really messes with your mind trying to figure out how it works, and you can get distracted from the real factors you should be thinking about. So I wanted to talk about lanes off of a skewed start line. So I'll zoom out a little bit, which means our boats don't really work as well. So if we have a pin-favored start with the red arrow as the wind, and a race committee favored start, just to compare them here. If you're gonna sail on starboard tack through the start line, and I hope you do, there are lots of options for, oh, it's in my hand, for where you could go. You know, any of these are lanes here, but on a pin end start, it's much more crowded. So, you know, I did this very roughly. It's definitely not scientific, but you can see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and these are spaced a bit more nicely. 1, 2, 3, 4 lanes, and these lanes are even spaced a little bit more tightly. So when there's a pin end favored start, there's actually fewer, or a port end favored start, there's actually fewer lanes to get through the start line. So it can be worth starting early, setting up early, so claiming your spot on the line a little bit earlier. Yeah, so just to be aware of that. Then the other thing I wanted to talk about here is when it is favored tactically. So this is favored because of wind angle or because of race committee not setting up a square line. But if it's favored because of current or because of wind, or because you anticipate there being a wind shift that you can take advantage of, then we have a different sort of effect. So if the advantage is here, maybe it's a point of land, and you anticipating that the wind is going to bend around that. So as you come in, you get knocked, and then you tack and you get lifted. You get lifted both ways with a point of land. So let's say there's a big advantage over here. Then it becomes extra important to have a nice lane, because you have to stay on starboard tack for a long time. So let's call that 1. Then if you had a red situation here, so the red side is an advantage, then I can have a terrible start, and so I'm back here. As long as these boats don't recognize that there's an advantage over there, I can tack behind these boats and still have a good race. So when the right-hand side of the course is favored, you actually, you can be more aggressive, you can try to fit into tighter spots, you can try different things, because if it doesn't work, you had to tack right anyway. But if the advantage is on the left, sometimes it's not worth starting over here, because these boats are gonna, probably only one of these boats is gonna succeed. This boat that has a nice lane, has a nice gap to leeward. So let's say one of these boats succeeds to getting to the advantage, and then this boat that had the nice lane succeeds to get to the advantage, and these other boats, they have to tack out and try to find a new lane. And this new lane isn't going to be so good because you've got your other boats. Maybe I'll make a different color here. You've got your other boats that made it. So these boats that were ambitious and tried to start right next to the pin, and then it didn't work out for them, they have to tack out and they end up in dirty wind. Maybe one person succeeds from that favored end, but the boat that sort of backed off, started a third away from the pin, a third of the line away from the pin, but far enough away that they had a nice lane. That boat manages to be the second boat towards the advantage. So left side of the course favor actually makes a big difference in your how aggressive you can be and how conservative you need to be with making sure you have a good start, not just a start near the favored end. Thoughts, comments, questions on that? Okay. Let's stop it there.